I'm Jono Buchanan. Now then, here's a question. Your favourite pieces of music, why do you listen to them over and over and over again? Maybe it's because you like the mood that they put you in, and once you've listened to a song once and it makes you feel a certain way, it's a nice way of being able to kind of tap back into that feeling again. Maybe it's because you have a particular association with that song, or you have been to see whoever recorded it play live and you've gone back to it because you haven't listened to it for a little while. But sometimes I think we listen to music over and over again because every time we listen to it, we hear something else. There's a new little part or a new little element that we didn't notice the first time we listened. And in other words, we're kind of rewarded for repeat listening. And I think production provides us with this amazing opportunity to create these little moments, these little Easter eggs, if you like, where our repeated listeners can come back and suddenly find things that they didn't find the first time. And I've always really enjoyed producing music that does that. Little subtle ear candy effects, which potentially you only spot on the second or third listening. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take a sort of song. So in other words, this little 8-bar verse. And what we're going to do is we're going to pretend it's a whole song, and we're going to go overboard with just creating little ear candy treatments just to begin to see the sorts of effects that I'm talking about, so that maybe you can apply some of them to your productions, or hopefully start thinking, okay, well, that seems like quite a creative idea. Maybe I can think of my own creative ideas that I can bring to my tracks. So let's have a listen to the track that we'll be working on, and then we'll begin to explore some of these ear candy effects.
Love ain't simple with you anymore. We have become opposites. No, love ain't simple with you anytime. Battle lines drawn.
Okay, so there's our 8 bars, and obviously you can hear that there's a vocal for this track, and it's the vocal that we're going to be prioritising at least to start with, but not exclusively. We're going to have a look at some effects for some of the other instruments as well. Okay, now what you can hear is that at the moment this vocal is absolutely bone dry. It's got some EQ on it, and it's got some compression on it. I mean, in fact, it's got a multi-band compressor on it as well, which is just providing a little bit of sort of dynamic change in different frequency bands, but mostly it's just this dry vocal that is more or less the same the whole way through, apart from its dynamics being managed a little bit. Now, of course, the temptation with vocals is to think, okay, well, what I want to do firstly is to kind of sit this vocal in a sort of reverberant space, where maybe what I do is I create a reverb solution which makes it feel like it belongs to the kind of smooth atmospheric backing track a little bit. So maybe what I might do is to come and find a sort of medium space. I might come and find a plate reverb, and we'll see whether or not, oh, actually I might go for a larger space. Let's come into the plates and see if we can find a sort of vocal plate. Yeah, sure enough, here's a vocal plate preset, which is just going to give us some sort of plate reverb around this vocal.
Love ain't simple with you anymore. We have become opposites.
And that's fine, and that would work well, and I'm sure it would sit in the mix quite nicely. But I think it's interesting to play around with space in ways that aren't quite so linear or predictable, because the problem with a vocal treatment like this is that once your brain has got used to the fact that it's just part of the mix, it will kind of forget about it. It will sort of say, oh yeah, the vocal's got a bit of reverb on it, and that seems to be consistent. And of course, you're not making that sort of listening choice consciously, but your brain is doing that because the reverb treatment is consistent. So the first thing I'm going to do is to make a treatment like this, which is not in any way dramatic. I'm nevertheless going to make it dynamic. I'm going to come and find the send level, which is, in other words, this in the main section here, I'm going to come and find the send level, the absolute level. And what I'm going to do is to automate it. So I'm going to actually leave this vocal as a completely dry space, apart from on the longer phrase end words, where I'm going to introduce this reverb. So in other words, I'm automating this send parameter.
Love ain't simple with you anymore. We have become opposites.
So I'm going to do the same thing here on this next phrase as well. And I'm going to do the same thing where the next phrase ends, which I'm guessing is probably in bar 7.
No, love ain't simple with you anytime. Battle lines drawn.
And I'm going to leave the last one dry, because again, probably people would assume that if this was the kind of shape of the space overall, that each phrase end would open up with reverb, and to leave the last one dry again just ever so slightly on a very subliminal level keeps people guessing.
Love ain't simple with you anymore. We have become opposites. No, love ain't simple with you anytime. Battle lines drawn.
Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do is to duplicate this entire track. There is my vocal, complete with all of its treatment, and I'm going to create an absolutely identical version of it on the track underneath. And then what I'm going to do is to copy the vocal down to it as well. So if I was to press play, we'd hear exactly the same thing happening twice. Well, there's no point us doing that. I don't want to do that. But having a second version of this track allows me to go looking for a different type of treatment. And this time what I'm going to do is to think about a pitch treatment. I'm going to come down to the pitch options here, and I'm going to start with the idea of pitch shifting. I'm going to take the entire vocal down 1 octave. Now, because there is a mix dial, I could just apply this treatment on the original vocal, and what I could do would be to decide how much mix to apply to it. But again, I want to be selective about this effect. I want to be able to switch it on and switch it off. And the easiest way to do that is to duplicate the vocal and literally just chop in and out for the sections where I want to apply that. So I've duplicated the track, which means that the mix can be at 100% in level because, of course, I only need this to be the pitch shifted version. The original version is here. Now, pitch shifted vocals, particularly when they come down an octave, always sound a bit weird, and that's exactly why I'm drawn to this idea. I want this to sound a bit otherworldly and a bit strange, but almost certainly what that's going to mean is I'm going to need it to be a lot quieter than the original vocal. Well, we can worry about vocal volume in a little while. Let's just have a listen to this pitch shifted offset of a duplicate of the vocal.
Love ain't simple with you anymore. We have become opposites. No, love ain't simple with you anytime. Battle lines drawn.
Okay, actually it's really interesting, and it almost sort of turns it into this kind of weird robot-y kind of duet. I really like it. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm just going to use the marquee tool, an amazingly useful tool for being able to select a whole area. Then what I can do is to click and it will remain selected, and that then means that I can just grab all of the automation data within those marquees, sort of region settings, and grab the whole lot and bring it down. So I'm just using volume balance for now. We haven't yet muted in and out the sections we want to use. We'll do that next. So let's just get the volume right first.
Love ain't simple with you anymore. We have become opposites. No, love ain't simple with you anytime. Battle lines drawn.
And what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to use exactly the same sections where I've applied reverb. So I'm going to just use the bits where the reverb is happening in the original. But one thing I am going to do right at the end is to experiment with what happens if I take the pitch shifting up an octave rather than down an octave for the very last phrase. So that's going to be a semitone offset. So I'm going to come to the pitch shifter and come and find its semitones. And what I'm going to do again is just to create a little automation line where I jump from -12 to +12.
You anytime. Battle lines drawn.
Now that sounds really silly and kind of crazy, but firstly it's definitely too loud, and so I'm going to turn its volume down. But I'm also just wondering whether or not what we might be able to do would be to use this as a kind of harmony rather than coming up the octave. I wonder what happens at, let's say, +7. Now I genuinely don't know. I haven't rehearsed any of this. I'm just literally experimenting in a way that I would if I was producing this record.
You anytime. Battle lines drawn.
Okay, that's kind of weird and sort of strange, but I quite like it.
You anytime. Battle lines drawn.
And it sort of feels like if that was a 7 on the end.
Battle lines drawn.
So I've kind of used a pitch shifter now to create a little harmony on this end phrase.
Battle lines drawn.
And again, it's really quiet. And what we could do on this particular track would be to say, okay, well, I've copied across the reverb treatment that I was using as well. And what we could do would be to make that phrase in this pitch shifted version even more reverberant.
You anytime that line's drawn.
So we just get this little ghost disappearing into the distance. So with reverb and pitch shifting, we've immediately kind of created this kind of anti-vocal, this kind of weird sort of, duetty sort of robot treatment, if you like, using pitch shifting in that way. So let's have a look at what else we might be able to do. Let's come back to the original vocal again. And I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to put this one, they're all called vocal original because, of course, I've just duplicated the track. So I'm going to just call this one vocal pitch, because those are my pitch treatments. And then what I'm going to do is to bring the original vocal again down here, and I'm going to copy it. Now this time, what I'm interested in doing is seeing whether or not I can find any little phrases that I might be able to loop or create little sort of effects out of. So I'm going to just solo this. This is, of course, again, going to be an absolute carbon copy of the original, and I'm just listening for little moments.
Loving ain't simple with you anymore.
Okay, so this word, more, again, what I'm interested to do is to see whether or not I might be able to just find a little section of this. Let's just see what happens if I copy or just cut into literally a kind of 16th note of this phrase. So what I'm going to do is to make sure that I don't go any further than this moment. So I'm putting a little scissor chop here. And what I'm going to do is to throw away that, and also throw away this. And every time I do it, because there's automation on this track, Logic's asking me if I want to keep it or remove it. So I'm just telling it to ignore that for now. And what I'm going to do is just literally duplicate this. In fact, because this box is going to pop up all of the time, I'm going to press the don't ask again, and I'm going to hit copy. So it's going to copy the automation data. And what I'm then going to do is just see what happens when I copy this little sort of repeat phrase of this word more. Let's have a listen. It's obviously not going to be the whole of that word. Okay, that's nice and interesting and kind of weird. Let's have a listen to it in the context of the whole track. Again, it's going to be too loud and its frequency content is going to be full, but let's just see whether or not it sounds like it might be useful to us.
Loving ain't simple with you anymore. We have become.
Okay, so what's interesting is that the little pitch warp on the front of that note doesn't feel like it's working very well. So I'm going to just adjust the start points back a little bit, but I do like the second half, so I'm going to extend those out. And what that should mean is that we've still sort of got our 16th notes, it's just that we're using different bits. And if it's not a perfect 16th note, I don't think that will really matter too much. Let's just have a listen.
Anymore.
Okay, so that's much nicer. The pitch is much more consistent. It's working really nicely, but definitely what I want to do is to make sure now that it doesn't have the full tone of this vocal that the original does. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a filter on this sound. I'm going to come into the filter section, come and find the auto filter, and I want this to sound thin and ethereal. So rather than using a low pass filter, which is going to be murky, I think the first thing I'm going to experiment with is potentially using a high pass filter instead. So this is going to let through the high frequency content, but it's going to leave the bottom frequencies alone. Let's just have a listen. I think this could be really nice. So what I'm going to do is just have a bit of a look at whether or not what I can do is to potentially just have the sort of tone change a little bit. Let's come into the auto filter settings, come into cutoff, and what I'm going to do is just draw a little bit of a tone change. So it's going to start really thin, and then maybe across that it will just drop a little bit so that the tone's changing. I think that could be good. Let's have a listen to that.
Loving ain't simple with you anymore. We have become opposites.
And again, it's too loud. The temptation always with these little ear-candling moments is to go, that's really good, I'm going to turn it right up. But actually, if you were listening to this song, you want to hear the lead vocal and you want these little moments to just be very much kind of in the background. So there are a couple of things that I could do here. Firstly, I could definitely adjust volume again so that we're making sure that this is really out of the way. And again, rather than using the marquee tool this time, I'm literally just creating a couple of points at either end of this effect. And I'm just going to bring it down. And the other thing, of course, I could do would be to think a little bit about maybe automating pan. And what this is going to do is to give me a chance to create a little sort of across the stereo field kind of an effect where maybe the sound starts on one side of the mix and crosses to the other side.
Loving ain't simple with you anymore. have become opposites.
So that's working really nicely. Okay, that now makes me think that I want to do something different in the next little break. I'm going to come back to the original vocal, and again, I'm going to set up a new auxiliary, and maybe this time what we'll do is to set up a delay treatment, which just works as a kind of one-off delay. So I'm going to come into the tape delay, which is my favorite delay within Logic. Let's come and find the tape delay, and what I want this time is to set up a delay that feels like it could work just on this second phrase. So again, I'm going to just put a little solo around the original vocal. At the moment, the send level is up, which means that the entire phrase is going to pick up this delay, and that gives me a chance to get the delay settings right before I then configure them for the particular phrase we're interested in.
Opposites. No, loving ain't simple with opposites. Opposites.
Okay, so I like this half note delay. I want to pick up just one repeat of the word opposites. Okay, now that means that if I want to have that just be one repeat, I need to make sure that the feedback is really low. The feedback level controls how many repeats we're actually going to hear. Now, interestingly, by default, what has also happened is that even though I've put this effect on an auxiliary bus, Logic has only given me 30% of wet signal. Now, because it's on an auxiliary, I can afford for this effect to only provide me with the delay. So I can turn the wet level up to 100% because the dry level is coming from the original track.
Opposite. Opposite.
Still too many repeats. Let's see what happens if I turn the feedback down to 1%.
Opposite. Opposite. No, loving ain't simple. No, loving ain't simple.
Okay, so we're getting the one repeat of the word opposites, and of course the reason why the delay is carrying on is because the level is static. So what I'm now going to do is to come and find the send level for this second effect, send 2. I should have labelled these auxiliaries really, aux 5 and aux 6. That's no help to me, for me to actually know what these effects are, so I should be labelling them. I'll do that now. Okay. Just told myself I would, so I'm actually going to do it. That's my delay, and I know that bus 5 is my plate reverb. Okay, so I've labelled them now. So what I can do is to come and find send to bus 6. The advantage of that, by the way, is that now when I come back and I come looking for my effects, I can see the name of the effect that I'm actually using. And again, I want the absolute level.
Opposite. Opposite.
Okay, so that feels quite loud to me. So what I'm going to do is to literally just draw a little box around that area, but I'll just drop the level down a little bit. And there we are, we're in good shape. Now then, it sort of feels like this treatment, this little delay treatment that we've got here, could also potentially benefit from another effect, the delay being sent into something else. I wonder what happens, for instance, if I bit crush it. So that will mean that the quality, literally the audio quality, if you like, of this repeat will become less, a bit more distorted, if you like. And it's the downsampling amount that I'm particularly interested in changing. 8-bit always sounds a little bit too SID chip to me. I think it's a bit too obvious. I'm going to take the resolution to 10-bit, where we're still going to get some breakup in the signal, but I want the kind of aliasy overtoniness of the downsampling more than anything else. Let's try that.
Opposite. Opposite. No.
Yeah, so it sounds a little bit like a kind of phone signal, but without having done that with EQ. It's just got that kind of quality to it. And again, always thinking about whether or not effects like this can evolve or change in some way. I'm just going to see what happens if I manipulate the downsampling the whole way through that phrase.
Opposite. Opposite. No, loving ain't simple.
Okay, so that's interesting. It breaks up even more. I'm tempted to automate that. I'm going to just record some automation data for the downsampling amount. Let's come back to where we want it to start, which is going to be over here, and we'll just run it through this phrase. And again, I'm waiting for the repeat to happen.
Opposite. Opposite. No, loving ain't simple.
Now, the moment I press stop, this track will be added to my project because now there is automation on this. I might want to adjust that automation. It actually sounded okay to me, so I think we're going to stick with where we were. But the one thing I might do is just turn the volume of the return level down. Again, I don't want this to dominate the mix. I want it to just be a little moment that happens.
Loving ain't simple with you anymore. We have become opposites. No, loving ain't simple.
So that's nice. I feel like that could definitely get sent into our plate reverb so that that treatment is just a little bit more out of the way and it's definitely still too loud.
Opposites. No, love it ain't simple.
I like that. I think that's good. So we can go through the vocal and we can continue to think, okay, well, what else could we do? And across this channel, we've looked at so many ways in which creative effects can be applied, whether it's bit crushers, delays, reverbs, other treatments. You could sample little phrases and create pads out of them. The list of potential options is huge. Now, there's definitely one more thing that I want to do, which is to look at whether or not we can do something interesting with the beats as well. And in particular, again, what I'm tempted to do is to duplicate this beats track. I'm going to sort of drop it down here, and then I'm going to be careful. Now, what I want to do a little bit is to process the audio for this beat loop. Now then, whenever you copy a file in Logic, literally just copy it from one track to another, it's the same file. The audio file at the heart of this beats track is the same on both of these two tracks. They aren't separate audio files. They're separate regions. Why does that matter? Well, let's suppose I decided I wanted to reverse this beat loop. Well, this one would reverse too, because they're the same thing. Okay, that's a really important point. It's the difference between an audio file and a region. A region is a part of an audio file. We're using the whole of the audio file, but effectively these two things are exactly the same thing. So hopefully that makes sense. In order to be able to do things from an audio processing point of view to this duplicate, I need it to become an audio file in its own right. I need to promote it from being a region of an audio file to an audio file in its own right. And the easiest way to do that is to control click it and just literally to convert it to a new audio file. If you aren't seeing that option up at the top, you'll find it in the convert folder. Here it is, convert to new audio file. It's going to give me an opportunity to give it a name, and I'm just going to call it beats processed. I don't know what I'm going to do to it yet, but I'm going to beats process it. And the useful thing is that immediately it will take it back to the kind of green default color for the track. So I can immediately see that that's its own thing. So it might be quite interesting to start with reversing it. To do that, I'm going to double click on the file, make sure that I'm looking at the file tab here, not the track tab, but the file tab. And that gives me access to this functions menu. And here I can reverse it. So what do the beats sound like backwards? Well, probably like a backwards loop, do you think? Always good. Why is it always good? Why is reversing always good? Well, anyway, there we are. Reversing is always good. Let's have a listen to that. Okay, now if I was going to run both of these loops at the same time, I want to be able to differentiate between them tonally. So the first thing I would do, I think, would be to come to this loop, and again, I would apply some filtering. Because I've been with the filter recently, what I'm going to do is to find it in my most recent sort of folder. I'm going to come here, and again, I'm going to use this high pass filter treatment. Let's just solo it. I want to get away from the kind of murky low end of this. Could add some resonance. And what I'm also going to do is just get a little bit of LFO movement into it as well. I want this to basically unfold over a bar, I think. So effectively what we're going to get is this kind of undulation in the filter, so it gets brighter and duller and brighter and duller. That's nice. Again, it'll probably be too loud, but let's just hear it like that for now. Just the two beat loops together to start with. Yep, I like that, but I don't want to use it every bar. Again, remember, ear candy moments become really boring really fast if they're completely constant. So I'm going to just use this every once in a while. I might use the last 2 bars. Let's just have a listen. I'm going to just mute this for now. I might need some of that, but we'll see.
Love ain't simple with you anymore. We have become opposites. No, love ain't simple with you anytime. The battle line's drawn.
I'd have forgotten about that pitch shifted end section. It's been a little while since we've heard it. Okay, what I'm going to do is with both of these regions, I'm going to turn up their gain. I want them to be louder at the end. But what I'm also going to do is to use the fade tool by pressing T and coming to the fade tool so that during the sort of development of those phrases, they fade in. Now, one thing that's worth noting is that I've got to be careful here. Even though this region is muted, if I draw a fade over these two bars and I go too far, it's going to create a crossfade with the previous region, which is not what I want. I'm in a whole bunch of trouble there. So what I'm going to do is to undo that for a moment. And because I've decided I definitely don't want to use this, I'm going to get rid of it altogether. And then if I come back to the fade tool, I don't need to be nearly so picky about where my fade ends because Logic knows that's definitely going to be a fade in. So now those two little treatments are just going to be fade ins. Okay, there's one more thing I want to do as well. Come back to the beat loop again duplicate it, and again what I'm going to do is to convert that to a new audio file. I can call this beats stretch because there's a little spoiler alert. I'm interested in potentially creating a little stretched version of this. And one thing I might do then would be to say, okay, well, it's around this middle section where I'm interested in seeing what happens if I stretch it. Under that word, which I keep coming back to, opposites, feels like a nice thing to be potentially doing something interesting with. So what I'm going to do is just select this area here, and I'm going to just select this area here as well, just this bar, and I'm going to hold down the option button, which is going to give me my time stretch tool, and I'm going to stretch it so it becomes half that length. So this is effectively going to double in time, which I think is quite interesting. So we're going to put that there. Again, I'm tempted to filter it because I want this to feel kind of skittery and top-endy. I might come back to the Bit Crusher and give it a bit more of that as well. And then what we'll do again is to come into here, find the auto filter. Again, I'm going to use something which is, in fact, maybe we'll go for a bandpass filter this time. Give it a bit of resonance because I want it to be a bit fizzy. Let's get rid of the envelope. That's better. And again, what I'm going to do is to give this a significant gain boost. So we're going to hear this a little bit more clearly.
Love ain't simple with you anymore. We have become opposites. No, love ain't simple.
That's quite nice, isn't it? I quite like that. So again, what I'm going to do is to make sure that that automation on that filter is just being tracked. Now, I've made life difficult for myself. I've come through a plugin now with loads of parameters. Remember, I could go to the latch mode and simply just draw that cutoff data, but it's going to be here somewhere. In fact, look, it's third in the list. I'm just being blind. Okay, so there we are. I'm going to come down to this cutoff data, and what we'll do again is just draw a little bit of a shape for this so that the filter is dropping over the sort of duration of that. That's nice. I like it. I like that even more.
Love ain't simple with you anymore. We have become opposites. No, love ain't simple with you anytime. Battle lines drawn.
And I've copied it again at the end and just inverted that filter movement. And effectively now what we've got is this little double time section. Now you can begin to see how far you can go. And the crucial thing I didn't say at the beginning of this video, but you have seen sort of happen, is that I haven't attempted to create ear candy moments by setting up new sounds. All of these treatments have been mined from the tracks that we've worked with already. I haven't touched the pads yet, but we could absolutely go there too. Maybe creating some sort of weird little pitch shifting thing where the pads kind of drop or get sort of swamped into some sort of weird delay. Maybe again, they pick up some sort of pitch shifting treatment. Well, you can go wherever you like. But if you know the techniques that are available and if you know how to execute them, what you can do is to create all of these little vocal treatments or these little pad treatments or beats treatments or bass treatments. Anything within your mix can be mined for its kind of ear candy potential. And definitely my favorite records and the things that I notice the most and the things that keep me coming back to listen over and over again are just constantly surprising me with little moments that I hadn't noticed before. And I think there is always a huge opportunity to be very creative with your production when it comes to techniques like these.